and make it available. You should have just heard that voice telling you recording in progress. It will be made available afterwards for you and for anyone who may have signed up but missed it. But if you have any questions, please send it to the Q&A and we will address them at the end of the presentation. You can also email us at info@anjec.org if you have any questions. And for those of you who don't know, we are ANJEC. We are a small nonprofit based in Mendham, New Jersey, but we are statewide, and we help to serve over 300 environmental commissions across the state to promote local action and provide resources to them to build equitable, healthy communities. And through our mission, we are empowering environmental commissions to take action for their environment and sustainability needs, and to advocate for their environment to their local governments and to their residents or with their residents. And so we provide a resource center that you can find on our website that has model ordinances, our handbooks, our quarterly ANJEC report, which is mentioned on here as well, manuals and just so much more that you can find on our website that you can find useful and is free to the public. We also offer monthly virtual webinars and roundtable events, so please be sure to check out our events page and you can find everything that's happening or find us on social media, and we will also be updating our events on there. And as I said before, there's the quarterly ANJEC report and the bi-weekly ANJEC news that you can get. You can get e-blasts and newsletters directly to your email, and updates from us in various different ways, and a bi-weekly environmental news digest. And then we also have the annual Fundamentals for Environmental Commissions training, which we offer every year in the springtime, and our Congress, which we just had at Rowan College at Burlington County. What was it now? 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And it was it was a wonderful event. It was our 51st Environmental Congress. And um, it was a huge success. So thank you to everyone who attended if you did. And another duty of ANJEC is to provide advocacy for New Jersey's environmental commissions and statewide issues that we are facing in our environment across the state. And that includes our leadership in the New Jersey No Plastics campaign, in which we've advocated successfully for the ban and the regulation of single-use plastics, along with NJ Pact, in which we participate with supporting the NJDEP's new flood rules and NJ Real, and a multitude of other initiatives, such as renewable energy, advocacy for environmental commissions, and so on. So we are really involved in many different parts of the state, getting a lot of different things done. And all of this work that we do is made possible because of supporters like you. So thank you so much for those who support us and for do work, to support ANJEC and your own environmental commissions. We are funded by memberships, individual donations and contributions, foundation support, and corporate sponsors. And if you'd like to become a municipal member, you can scan this QR code here to learn more about how you can do it. I'm just going to go back to that just for a second. So that QR code right there. And in 2024, we have a number of priorities, which go with having a stormwater series, but also which align with our mission, which is to support compliance with MS4 permits through doing educational outreach and community engagement. We engage in mapping and GIS, watershed implementation planning. We support the adoption of stormwater utilities, and we fight to end plastic pollution. And we work really hard to advance climate resiliency planning and projects in municipalities and expand renewable energy projects and developments. And if interested, you can check out our events page on our website. We have a ton of interesting programs that are coming up, and 2 more parts of our stormwater series, including a Clean Water Act webinar and a road salt webinar with the DEP on the 22nd and the 29th for these 2 webinars. And then we have 2 more in January coming up, and you can find all of this on our events page. And just a reminder before we get started, today is the last day to register for voting. If you haven't, don't forget, we need to get the vote out to make sure that our legislators and elected officials are advocating for the environment and for a sustainable planet. And so your vote does count, especially in local elections. So if you haven't registered to vote yet, please do, and please make sure that you vote. And thank you so much for coming today in general. We really appreciate it. And if you want to keep up with us after this, please give us a follow on these social media pages. We have a YouTube page, Facebook, and Instagram right now. And you can also DM us on any of those pages. Well, not the YouTube, but Facebook and Instagram if you have any questions. And feel free to scan this QR code here if you are interested in becoming a member of ANJAC. Thank you all so much for your support and for being here again on this lovely, cool Tuesday evening. I would love to introduce our expert speaker today, Policy Director Michael Pissarro, a practicing attorney with over 25 years of experience. And as the advocacy director advocacy director, I've been calling him policy director this whole time, but he works so much with policy. Advocacy director for the Watershed Institute. He engages with the state and local officials to protect New Jersey's watersheds. And along with helping state officials update New Jersey's stormwater management rules, he wrote the Watershed Institute's enhanced model stormwater ordinance, which is something he's going to talk about tonight. This effort helped guide municipalities in better protecting local communities from flooding and improve their water quality. Thank you so much for being here today, Mike. We really appreciate it. And like we said, if you have any questions, please hold it until the end and we're happy to answer them. And feel free to put it in the chat. And I'm going to stop sharing now so that Mike can share his screen. Thanks, Mike.
Right. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Sheila and Liz. Thanks, ANJAC, for this opportunity. I always enjoy talking about stormwater, which seems strange and weird, but I do. And I alternatively use policy and advocacy just to confuse people. As I'm pulling up my screen, could people sort of raise their hand if they've experienced flooding in the last couple of years and whether they think that flooding is getting worse or better? I'm just sort of curious to see how that shakes out. So what are people thinking? All right. So a lot of hands are going up. They're experiencing flooding and it is getting worse. All right. So talking about stormwater, as I said, something I enjoy to talk about. All right. A little about the Watershed Institute. Keeping our water clean, safe, and healthy is the heart of our mission. I'm going to sort of go really through these quick. We have a reserve, 10 miles of trails. Come out and enjoy nature. The more you go out and enjoy nature, the more you want to protect it. We have a great building, very hard to work in with nature and a bunch of kids. And as you know, Hannah mentioned, I'm the advocacy or policy director, but we have conservation, science, and education. All right, I'm going to do some setting of the stage because, you know, when you talk about stormwater to people who aren't really working in it, they don't really think about it as an issue. They don't generally think about it at all unless they experience flooding. And right now, we're not in a technical drought, but as we haven't experienced rain in a while, it's kind of hard to think about stormwater. So in the beginning, you know, in the 50s and 60s, early 70s, we had flammable rivers. And not being a scientist, but even I, as a lowly lawyer, knows that's not the natural condition for water, and that was bad. And that was because we used our waterways as a dumping ground. Anything we didn't want, we sort of dumped into the waters and caused a whole host of problems, most visually flammable rivers, so not good. And that resulted in the Clean Water Act. And the Clean Water Act in 1972, the federal statute, actually the Water Pollution Control Act, had lots in it. The two big takeaways is we were going to stop discharging pollutants into navigable waters by 1985. And we were going to restore our water so that it was healthy enough for fish and shellfish and wildlife and recreation by 1983. Now, I have highlighted those two things in red for a reason. And so the question is really, how are we doing? And so if I had you in a room, I would have asked this question and get your feedback. The reality is we're not doing too well. We switched the problem. So we're still discharging from industrial complexes, pollutants, chemicals. But we've got a really good handle on that because of the Clean Water Act. The pollution we're now experiencing is very different than what started in the 70s and caused the Clean Water Act. On the left on the screen is that greenish color. That is a harmful algal bloom in the Millstone River a couple of years ago. Not something you normally see in rivers. Lakes and ponds, yes. Rivers, no. And on the right is a picture the day after Ida in Trenton, where that building is not Venice. It shouldn't be underwater, but is. So we're kind of not doing well. And so we have DEP every 2 years as part of the Clean Water Act, monitors and reports on water quality. This is the 2022 report that is in draft. I don't think it has been finalized yet, showing that orangey color. Most of our waterways aren't healthy enough for aquatic life. A good chunk of our waterway you probably don't want to have primary contact with for recreation, so you probably don't want to go swimming in there. So, that's 2022. That's a snapshot. And some people say to me, well, that's just 1 year. It's not really that bad. So the 2018, 2022 report, kind of similar. Then we go even farther back, 2016, 2010, a whole lot of red, not a whole lot of green. And over that period of time, our detection standards have gotten better. The number of segments of stream miles that we are monitoring have increased. But sort of the trend is at best, we're holding bay. We're not getting a whole lot worse. We're not getting a whole lot better. In one of the earlier reports of this integrated water quality assessment report, DP basically said our best quality waters are degrading, our worst quality waters are improving. And if you look at it from the 70s to the present, that kind of makes sense as we sort of improve our pollution control on industrial processes, chemical plants, manufacturing, etc. That gets better. But on the other hand, the people pollution is what's causing that current degradation. And again, from the 2016 Integrated Water Quality Assessment Report, it's us. Declining water quality trends, salt, agriculture areas, urban runoff. So it's people pollution, not necessarily manufacturing or other type of things. And as we create more and more impervious surfaces, we get more stormwater runoff and more impacts. So this is from DEP's report. If I went to EPA, I would find very similar language nationwide. So it's not just a New Jersey issue, but New Jersey being one of the first states, one of the first developed states, and one of the states that, if not, at one point, we were going to be the first state to reach full build out, which means we were going to be the first state that every piece of developable land will have been developed. So we have a whole host of legacy issues. And for those of us who don't remember the water cycle or didn't pay attention in high school or elementary school, this sort of ties in and sort of really explains why we're having these issues. In the natural condition on the left, 50% of that water goes into the ground and stays there. 10% runs off the ground and into our waterways. 40% evaporates or evapotranspirates, through plant usage. As we get more and more developed, those numbers go down, where only 15% of that's infiltrating and 55% of that's evaporating. So as we put more and more impervious surfaces, we're forcing that water off our properties. We're forcing that water to collect everything that we've put on there, intentionally or unintentionally. The litter, the pesticides, the fertilizers, the brake dust, the asbestos, the antifreeze, the leaking oil, all of that runs off into our streams. And as we developed, and it's a little bit out of date, you can sort of see on the right-hand side, really dramatic red, all that impervious area, all that urban. On the left-hand side, it's a little more updated, 2015. So we're always a little bit behind on impervious cover analysis, but good chunks of the state have already been developed. We've been very lucky in the state having a good open space program, but in large parts of the state have been developed. And all that impervious cover means that water has nowhere to go but our streams. And again, as I said, to carry with it everything that we put there. So we have a lot of impervious cover, but we're also seeing another thing. So we're seeing climate change. We're seeing weather patterns changing. Climate Central here did an analysis back in 2019 showing New Jersey is getting wetter. So from 1950 to 2019 or so, we are wetter. DEP did a series of studies in 2020, quantifying how much, sort of in line, but they also projected the future. So not only have we gotten wetter, but what can we expect as we go forward? And that's important because what we build today will be here in 50, 60, 70 years, if not longer. So that projection and what stormwater needs to start to deal with is by 2100, depending on where you are in the state, and there's the map from that report that DEP put out, here where I am in Mercer County is going to be 36% wetter, more rain annually than we currently are getting. Let's see, where is it? Mendham is, I think, somewhere going to be 48, 46% wetter than what we are currently experiencing. So thinking about that, the infrastructure we have today, I'm living in a house that was built in the 1990s. Some of our older urban areas, some of our older suburban areas, those houses were built in the 1800s, 1900s. And so we got to think about that as we're going for the future. So how do we manage stormwater in New Jersey? So I'm going to talk a bit about how we do it now, some of those issues, and I'm going to tease a little bit. There was a mention about NJ Pact Real. I'm going to tease a little bit about that because that does change the landscape from what we're currently doing, but doesn't quite fix it. So this picture, I took this picture myself on August 6th, which is kind of ironic because we had just celebrated in a press conference, ANJAC, the Watershed Institute, and others, the release of the real rules, which will help address climate change. And this is a local restaurant in my township, where the water was up almost to the hip of people because we got 7 or 8 inches in an hour. And there was just nowhere for that water to go very quickly. So very quickly, oops, sorry, that went away. As I mentioned, the Clean Water Act 1972. Clean Water Act in 1972 did not require stormwater management. So in 1972, no one was thinking stormwater management from a Clean Water Act perspective. New Jersey in 1983 started requiring stormwater management on a state level and looked at that as land use control. In 1990, EPA started saying, well, stormwater's a problem. We got to start to get a handle on it, and required large cities to start to address stormwater. Those with the phase 4 MS4, municipal separate storm sewer system permit, or MS4. 1999, smaller, medium-sized municipalities were required to start doing stormwater. New Jersey adopted those regulations, what we sort of think of as modern stormwater management, in 2004, and issued its first MS4 permit. In 2020, we had a big change in the way and how we manage stormwater. So we changed the techniques that we use to manage stormwater, but we didn't change any of the standards in 2020. So after 2020, we started seeing more rain gardens and bioretention versus the giant basins at the bottom of a development out of the way, probably with a concrete low flow channel. In 2020, that changed. In 2023, New Jersey issued a new MS4 permit, and that's important. And I'm going to touch a little bit on why that's important and why that can help municipalities do better for stormwater management. In 2023, DEP issued what's called the Inland Flood Protection Rules, which updated the way we calculated storms. So we accounted for changes in rainfall from 1950 to present, and then also designing for the future. And up until 2023, we never did that. We always dealt with the past. 2023, we started dealing with the future. And then August of this year, we issued or at least proposed the real rules, which again, I will talk a little bit about, which will again change how we manage stormwater a little bit. So the 1983 Stormwater Management Act, which popped it into the municipal land use law, had certain requirements. We were going to reduce flood damage. We're not going to eliminate it. We're going to reduce it. We're going to minimize stormwater runoff, but we're not going to eliminate the runoff. We're going to do soil erosion. We're going to try to manage our bridges and culverts. We're going to try to recharge. So remember earlier I showed as we more develop, less gets into the ground. The stormwater rules in 2004 required to recharge. And again, to the extent possible, we're going to prevent an increase in on-point pollution. We kind of failed on that one dramatically. And we're going to try to maintain the integrity of our stream channels so that these streams are healthy enough. And I've highlighted these because these are areas I think we really, truly have missed the boat and haven't really met what we're supposed to be doing. Let's see. So again, we have flooding. So we kind of failed on reducing flood damage. That's a stream bank. That is a stream bank. If probably everyone in here will look at and say, yep, that's kind of what my stream near me looks like. That highly eroded bank is not what natural streams look like. That's not the way they're supposed to be, but that is because of the way we manage stormwater. And again, we kind of failed in dealing with that non-point source pollution, that land use pollution that we have. So overall, the way we manage stormwater is we're slowing the degradation, we're not stopping it, and we're not reversing it. It's all about minimizing the damage. The way we do stormwater is we only make stormwater management for large developments. I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. We don't deal with the legacy. So if you were built in the early 1900s, you probably don't have stormwater management. And to the extent you do, it is how do I get the water off my property somewhere else as fast as possible, just so I am not flooded. But that means someone else is flooded. So our stormwater rules aren't dealing with the legacy development. And we don't deal with runoff volume. The rules require us to manage quality, quantity, and recharge. So we have to make the water not as dirty as it would be without stormwater management. It's still dirtier than it would be in its natural condition. We deal with quantity, and we don't really deal with quantity. That's a misnomer. And we try to mimic the recharge and try to require them to recharge what would be going into the ground normally until we put in impervious surfaces. And I say quantity is a misnomer because what we really do is we reduce how fast the water goes off our property. We actually increase the volume. So we don't actually manage quantity, we manage rate. But we call it quantity quality recharge. And if you have a project that meets the stormwater triggers, you have to do it. And again, we don't deal with redevelopment. We don't deal with property by and large that didn't have stormwater management and is being repurposed. That's the way things are currently. And these things are, oops, sorry. Those two things I've highlighted in orange are going to be changing and starting to get better with the real rules. So there is hope. I'll talk about that. So we have the stormwater rules. That's how we manage stormwater. We have the MS4 permit, which every municipality in New Jersey has, which is their ability to review development applications, or their obligation to manage stormwater and to address it. So, that's sort of the legal authority of why municipalities are doing what they do post 2004. And the MS4 permit, the one that came out in 2023, is huge. It is huge. It changes the game. And I think it makes the conversation very different in municipalities when you as an EC member, you as the general public say to your elected officials, we want you to do better. We want you to do better than what the state requires. We should manage stormwater better. And the big change is what we call this watershed improvement plan. And this isn't an MS4 webinar, but I think this watershed improvement plan is a tool, is a lever we can use to get better stormwater management today. And that watershed improvement plan is in essence requiring municipalities, for the first time in New Jersey, and other states have done this for a number of years, to reduce water pollution. So if I'm in that integrated water quality assessment report, I have a stream in my town that's impaired or has what's called a total maximum daily load, which is basically a pollution budget. How much pollution can I discharge into a waterway? And yet that waterway meets the standard. So it's healthy enough for aquatic life. It's healthy enough for primary recreation. How much of a reduction from existing sources, existing pollution do I have to do? That's TMDLs in a nutshell. And I have to reduce flooding. So for the first time, legally, municipalities are required to do these things, which is huge. And there's 3 phases for this watershed improvement plan. Right now, we're in phase 1, where we're doing a bunch of mapping and understanding how our municipality works, where we are in the watershed, which is very important for phase 2 of developing projects. What is the municipality going to do to improve water quality and reduce flooding? And that, again, is huge. Up until 2023, municipalities weren't required to do this. ANJAC, the Watershed Institute, and others have argued for many years there has been a legal obligation to do it, and finally that's there. And here's where I think enhanced stormwater management is attractive, because as we continue to develop, we can continue to degrade more and more, or we can start having development through enhanced stormwater management be part of the solution. How do we improve water quality? How do we reduce flooding as we continue to develop and redevelop, versus having a municipality design 500 bioretention basins to reach the same goal? So taking opportunities for investment to improve, but the town needs to have those enhanced ordinances that enhance stormwater management and other mechanisms to do that. So in phase 2, this watershed improvement plan, sort of the draft plan, and then in year 5, the towns finalize that. So, and sort of we're in the middle of phase 1. What are those municipal enhancements? And here's a stream. I forget whether this is the Locatung or up in Stokes. This is kind of what a natural stream should look like. Not that big eroded bank. This is kind of what a natural stream that is not getting a ton of stormwater runoff probably would look like. And if we went back many, many years, more of our streams looked like. So municipalities can do enhanced stormwater management. There's a slight caveat to that. A whole nother webinar on residential site improvement standards. But in DEP, so DEP, when they came out with the inland flood protection rules, when they came out with the MS4 permit, they have a model stormwater ordinance. In that model stormwater ordinance that a lot of municipalities took, threw their town's name on it and called it a day, has that highlighted language of towns can take other actions. Towns can become stronger to address local water quality and flooding conditions and community needs. So right there, DEP says you can do it. So municipalities will sometimes say, well, we can't do it. This is what the state mandates. Nope, you can. This is the floor. You can do better. And so broad brush, the ordinance, the enhanced model ordinance, and there's a QR code that takes you to the webpage with the ordinance, a webinar on the ordinance that ANJAC, Pinelands Preservation Alliance, and others joined in on about the enhancements. We redefine what a major development is. So what triggers stormwater management? We address smaller projects, so we get some improvement, even though we don't get the full plethora of stormwater management of quantity, quality, and recharge. We address redevelopment because currently under the rules, we don't really address redevelopment. So if your property did not have stormwater management before, when you redevelop that site, probably is not going to have it afterwards. We have what's called low impact design. Let's have a gentle hand on the land, keep the land as clear, as close to natural conditions as possible, yet still meet your development goals. We have to consider where we're discharging. Is that waterway already impaired? If so, we have to do better. We can't just keep doing the same and assume things are going to get better. We need to actually start to address volume. That quantity, quality, recharge, that quantity, we need to actually make that a quantity standard. So our enhanced ordinance has on-site retention and a couple other things. And I have these in like light gray because the real rules are starting to address these things. And so if they get adopted and in place, these things will get better, but I would argue we don't have to wait for a year and a half for DEP to do its thing and then municipalities to do it. We can do those things today without a problem. So major development. You do stormwater management only when you have a major development. And that major development is I have disturbed an acre of soil. I've cleared all the trees and brush and I've regraded the site. I've disturbed an acre of soil. Our enhanced ordinance says, no, we should reduce that trigger to a half acre, getting more and more projects to do something. And some of our older suburban areas, we may not have acre lots left. We may have 3/4 of an acre lot. We may have a half acre lot. So reducing those triggers so we get more and more development managing stormwater. You do water quality treatment only if you're creating a new 1/4 acre of impervious surface. Well, again, we may not have a 1/4 acre lot. So we're not creating a new 1/4 acre of impervious. So we reduce that to 5,000 square feet of impervious cover. The existing rules, we only have to treat water quality for parking lots, driveways, things of that roads, things of that nature, yet sidewalks, patios, roofs also contribute to water pollution. The current rules don't require you to address those other things. And we say all surfaces need to have water quality treatment. All surfaces can contribute, maybe contributing different things, but we should all address those things so our water quality is improving, not worsening. And then I've talked about this. I'm going to go through this a little quickly. Current rule, we deal with rate, how fast stormwater runs off our site. We're actually increasing volume and we don't really require it. So we say we have an on-site retention standard, which is half of the 2-year storm. So depending on where you are in the state, that's roughly about 3.3 inches, 2-year storm. So you do half of that. And then as time goes on, those storms will be increasing, that amount increases. And then we go one step farther. So we have the on-site retention standard, but we still have development has to take the next step. Okay, even if I meet the quantity, quality, and recharge standards, even if I meet this on-site retention standard, am I contributing or making flooding worse downstream? And if I am, I need to do better, because we got to stop saying I've met the rules and flooding is flooding, and not my problem. It's someone else's downstream problem. And for most of our communities, we are downstream of somewhere. So we kind of want to be treated better and do that. And then we have a minor development requirement. So if you don't meet the major, you add an addition to your home, you add a patio, you add a swimming pool, you do some level of improvement on your property, you're adding to the stormwater load running off your site. So we think adding some requirements for minor development is important. So when you hit 250 square feet of impervious surface, you have to treat 2 gallons per square foot. So if you build a 250 square foot addition, you're treating 500 gallons. You're keeping some of that on site. And we did 2 things with this. One, we made it very easy calculations. So you don't have to have an engineer do all these complicated designs and calculations. It's very easy to figure out what you need. And then most people, as we add on to our properties, we improve our properties, we also do landscaping. If you can do it, you don't plop on a big addition on your home and then don't landscape around it. So why not make that landscaping do double duty? Why not make that landscaping part of your solution, your stormwater management, so that you're not continuing to degrade your neighbors, flood out your neighbors? Have the landscaping that you're going to do help manage your solution. And then redevelopment. So there's a redevelopment loophole, we call it. And technically, sites that are redeveloped still have to meet the stormwater standards. The thing is, what you have to do to meet the standards is very, very low. So here's a site in Hopewell Borough. It is probably 95, maybe close to 100% impervious surface. Someone comes in to redevelop this. As long as they're not increasing the impervious cover by 1/4 of an acre, they don't have to do water quality treatment. Now, DEP will sometimes make you do 50%. It's not anywhere in the rules, but you don't really have to do water quality. And a lot of our communities, when we redevelop, we're reducing the impervious cover. Not by a lot, but we're reducing it a bit. So you never trigger the water quality. So assuming this is an acre site, I'm redeveloping, I'm ripping out all the impervious cover and putting new in. I would trigger that 1 acre of soil disturbance. But then what I have to do from a quantity perspective is say, I either have to match or reduce the rate of runoff that is currently existing on that site. So if my rate of runoff is very, very fast, because there is no stormwater management, all I have to do is match very, very fast. And so I don't get any quantity benefits. Again, up until the real rules get adopted, I don't have to do any on-site retention. I don't have to reduce the volume. So I'm getting no improvements there. So our enhanced ordinance says, I have to assume when I do my calculations that none of that impervious surface exists. And that what really exists there is a forest in good condition, which gets me the lowest rate of runoff, gets me the most recharge, and gets me the best water quality. And that's how I design my site, assuming none of that impervious surface exists. I'm assuming that site is forested, and that's the rate of runoff I have to match. I have to do on-site retention, and I have to improve water quality as if this was somewhere else in the state that has no development. So as we start to make investments in redevelopment of our communities, we start making the problem better, one site at a time. And the real rules will have this to some extent, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, we have water quality impairments. 90% of our waters in New Jersey aren't meeting standards. So if I have to reduce let me say this again. So currently I keep talking about quality. I have to improve water quality. What it really is, I have to reduce the increase of total suspended solids, dirt, or other particles that are suspended. I have to reduce the increase by 80%, but I'm increasing it by 20%. Well, if I have a waterway that's impaired for sedimentation, I've made it worse by 20% than what's currently there. So we, in our enhanced ordinance, saying, understand where you're discharging your waterway, your stormwater to. What is its current condition? If it's already impaired, you need to take steps to make that stormwater runoff cleaner so that you are not further degrading the waterway. So that is big. That is also in some level in the real rules. And so I mentioned the real rules. Again, here's another opportunity. DEP released these rules in August. Comment period ends in November, and sometime between now and August 3rd or 4th, I think it is, DEP will hopefully adopt the rules, which means sometime after August of 2025, municipalities will have to enhance or change their stormwater ordinance again. Get ahead of it now. You have a year and a half to do it. But in the real rules, from a stormwater perspective, it has a couple things. The real rules, NJ Pact, New Jersey Protecting Against Climate Threats, Resilient Environments and Landscapes. The environmental field loves their acronyms. So the real rules will start, as I mentioned, get at that volume issue. Instead of 1/2 of the 2-year storm, it is 1.25 inches that we have to retain on site. They call it instead of the on-site retention standard, they call it the volumetric reduction standard. Retain on site through green infrastructure, 1.25 inches. There's lots of ways, if you can't actually meet it on site, to reduce impervious surfaces so you get at the same sort of impact of reducing volume. For those who are looking at this picture, that is a stormwater basin in my neighborhood after August 6th, where that 7 or 8 inches dropped in an hour or so. That overflow system was overflowing. And then from a redevelopment perspective, DEP is going to require going forward that we meet that quality. We don't care how much impervious surface you're creating, you're going to meet the full water quality standards. That 80% reduction in total suspended solids. And we're going to have the volumetric reduction standard. So we're going to have the on-site retention, but we're still not doing the quantity. So we're not doing the rate reductions, and we're not requiring recharge. So we're not requiring us to put back into the ground's water. And that's important for a couple reasons. One, some of our base flow to our streams is from the ground. So if we're drying out the ground, we're drying out our base flow to our streams. And obviously we're reducing our aquifers. So our wells, we are not recharging those. So we're not recharging and we're pulling out because we're drinking. Eventually we're going to have a problem. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to start requiring municipalities, both through the MS4 and the real rules, as well as major development, to start to care what the quality of the streams we are discharging and start implementing the plans in the TMDLs. And there's a snapshot of one of the TMDLs from the Stony Brook watershed, where we have to reduce existing stormwater discharges by 84%. So we got to make, just when this report was done in 2014, the existing discharges from stormwater was 84% more than that stream could handle. And then municipalities start to have to think, and this adds on to a requirement for municipalities to, in their land use code and master plans, to think about climate change. Well, now we're adding it into our stormwater plans as well. Municipalities develop a stormwater management plan. Um, how's climate change going to affect the town's stormwater? Uh, are the outfalls going to be underwater in a storm because of increased volume? And if it's underwater because the stream has risen, well, is that outfall going to be working? Maybe not. Is our stormwater basins in the floodplains, and therefore maybe they're not going to work? And what municipalities can do to fix that. So that's huge. I'm gonna put a quick plug. There's a lot of things your municipality can do. The stormwater ordinance is one of them, but there's also things you can do personally. We have a river friendly program. And you can go see that on our website for that. And then, as always, if you have questions, there's my contact information, and I'll be more than happy, or my staff happy to help you. We work with municipalities um, to improve and work through the issues. So that is a lot in 40 minutes or so. Um, if there are questions. All right. I explained everything perfectly and everything made complete sense.
Please feel free to put a question in the chat. Oh, we have a hand raised from Jeff Kaiser. Is Jeff able to unmute himself?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm from Somerville's Environmental Commission. Is the did the is the does the MS4 permit trigger the inland flood stormwater management requirements, or are they two separate things?
They're separate but related. So the MS4 permit, which every municipality in New Jersey has, requires the municipality to adopt a stormwater control ordinance. The inland flood protection rules modified the stormwater rules, which is what you would be implementing through your stormwater control ordinance.
Okay. And that the stormwater rules, the inland flood stormwater update rules were supposed to have been passed by last year, July, right?
Should have been done by July of this year. Yeah,
Okay.
so the township should have adopted a revised stormwater control ordinance by July of this year to comply with the inland flood. So that increase in rainfall, which I didn't explain very well, but when we were designing storms up until this year, we used 106 years worth of NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency's data that ended in 1999. So we were designing for the storm, the average or median storm of decades ago. And so the inland flood protection rule updated that to 2020. What are we currently experiencing? And then required us not only to design for today, but to design what we expect to happen in 2021. So there's two different storm events, two different 100-year storms that an engineer would have to design for to help address flooding and water quality issues.
I can keep asking questions if I can, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so the passage of those rules, if they're not passed, what kind of incentive or kind of enforcement that does New Jersey have if those rules and are not followed or passed by municipalities? Because we certainly haven't passed them.
So there's the theoretical. If you have not adopted a stormwater control ordinance in conformance with the inland flood protection rules, you are out of compliance. and DEP could issue a notice of violation. Most likely it would be, could you come up to speed and get updated? And theoretically, could be fines. And from a practical perspective, you have no way to require new development to comply with the new standards. So, communities that have not adopted the inland flood protection standards, or the developer could very easily say, I'm designing for the 1999 storm, which we know doesn't exist. And flooding that results from that is not my problem.
They don't have to follow the state regs. They have to just follow the municipality then?
Not always. So not always. So the conflict happens. So DEP, and I've heard different standards from DEP. They may see less than half of the application as a municipality, their land use board deals with, because it only goes to DEP if you need a flood hazard permit or a freshwater wetlands permit. If you're on the coast, maybe a CAFR permit, maybe a waterfront development permit. But if you don't need a permit from DEP, so if you're not crossing a stream, you're not discharging directly into a stream, you're not impacting a wetland, if you stay out of all those regulated areas, you don't necessarily need to go to DEP for a permit. If you don't need to go to DEP for a permit, you don't have to meet the NJAC 7:8 stormwater management rules.
Wow.
So,
Okay. And so you're saying that the your enhanced stormwater management rules that you've suggested, I've gone through it and tried to understand as much as I can, but basically you're saying that this addresses not just, what the current rules are now, it goes beyond that, and that it will actually take into account the real rules coming out next year, as well as going even a little bit further than that. Is that right?
I think so. I think I'm on firm ground, but I'm having an engineer look at this one aspect. So for our on-site retention, we say 1/2 of the 2-year storm, 1/2 of 3.3 inches. DEP says 1.25 inches. Over 2 hours, ours is over 24. I think our standard is more, but I'm having an engineer run those calculations just to make sure. That's one little caveat where I think our enhanced ordinance is better, but not being an engineer, I'm having someone with that degree look at that. But I think we're more protective.
I think this is my last question, then I won't take up too much of your time. But how does zoning ordinances follow up with this? How does zoning differ from the stormwater management, and how can that improve the town's dealing with all
Good,
this?
very good point. So there is two. One, again, there's a whole nother webinar. There's something called the residential site improvement standards, which restricts some of these enhancements. But if you put the stormwater enhancements in your zoning code, doesn't matter. So if you put it in the zoning code, if you put your stormwater rules in the zoning code as well as your land development code, you're fine. Princeton has done that. The other thing is your zoning code will determine your setbacks, will determine the amount of impervious cover allowed in the various zones. So if you have a flooding problem, or you're contributing to someone else's flooding problem, maybe going back and looking at your zoning code, is there a way to reduce impervious cover so we're having less runoff because we have more natural lands? Are we having setbacks from our environmentally sensitive areas? Some towns, when they do their impervious cover analysis from a zoning code perspective, will subtract out those environmentally sensitive. So if you have wetlands, steep slopes, and streams on your property, so if you have a 10-acre site and 3 acres of that is, environmentally sensitive, you have a steep slope to the wetlands,
Mike, I just want to chime in right here. We have about 2 minutes left and 3 more questions.
All right.
And so Sheila and Liz, should
Yeah.
we do a lightning round for answers or have everyone email Mike their questions?
Sure, no,
So
we
I
can,
think we have
go
time
ahead
to
and,
read the other, there's 2 questions there pending. We'll read those next. Sheila, can you do that? I'm going to move Jeff.
Sure. So there's a question, how can we find out what our municipality has done in their adoption of the stormwater rules?
So all towns are supposed to have a stormwater management page on their website, and that should list the stormwater ordinance that they've adopted. It will usually, the way towns number them is different, but usually we'll start with 2024 so that was done this year. Also, if it's not on the page, there's usually a link on the website to their code book, and you can go in and sort of Sherlock and investigate a little bit, but most towns should have a stormwater management page where the ordinances are out there.
Right, thank you. And then we have this question, please comment on, for a minor development, the applicant asks for a waiver that the rate of runoff after development will not exceed the rate before development. Site proposes less than an acre of disturbance and less than a quarter acre of new impervious surface.
So minor development doesn't, we go outside the realm of quantity, quality, and recharge requirements. Minor development is I'm running 2 gallons per square foot through bioretention by and large. You're getting some recharge, you're getting some, evapotranspiration, you're getting some water quality benefits. I think from a minor development perspective, there could be waivers or reductions in the requirements because if it's you physically can't do it or you don't have the space or you don't have the soils, the township should have a mitigation waiver fee system. So I'm paying to the town. If I can't do it on site, I pay into the town a fee. The town can then use it to improve its stormwater management system. They can put in bioretention somewhere that makes sense. You can't do that with major development, but you can do it with minor.
Okay, thank you. And then we have one last question here. What can we do for a town at the bottom of the hill that receives lots of stormwater from uphill due to reduce the load on downhill township? Obviously work together, but if there's a slow response, is there a trigger to force uphill to reduce?
There is no trigger necessarily to require the upstream towns to do anything. One, if you are a member of an EC, your neighboring towns, your upstream towns are probably having ECs. ECs like to talk to each other, reach out to your neighboring towns and ask them to start to help. And I think also that MS4 permit and that watershed improvement plan I talked about as being a leverage for towns to do better also could be a leverage for towns to work together. I have to solve and reduce flooding. How do I do that in an economical way? And there's a lot in there. Towns have to do all those studies. Well, if I do it on a watershed basis with all the towns in the same watershed, I'm sharing those costs. And I may also identify projects that will benefit the entire watershed that may be outside my town. So a town that is mostly impervious would have to rip out of impervious cover, build a bunch of bioretention, rain gardens, and other systems. But if I can do the same in essence, I can reduce water quality, improve water quality, reduce flooding upstream by restoring forest to the watershed. So less water is coming upstream. I've met the goals. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. The watershed improvement plan may be another lever for towns to start talking to each other and working regionally. And some of that is starting to happen.
Thank you. That sounds like that would be a good focus for a future webinar, is just focusing on the watershed improvement plan
Yeah,
to get a handle on that.
yeah.
All right. So anything else, Liz?
I don't think so. I think you covered everything. Thanks so much, Mike. We really
you so
appreciate you
much.
taking the time to come, and everybody, we appreciate your attendance, and we will share the resources as we mentioned, and thank you very much. And we'll see you next week with the next stormwater session. Have a good
Great.
night, everybody.
All right. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mike.
My pleasure.